Hey there, Enthusiacs. Welcome back to Hero Talk. I am your host, Judge Greg. Joining me today, I have the Dark Princess, Jen. Jen, how you doing?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Good. Also have Jeff, Baron Fang from the Point Streak podcast.
Evening.
Yeah. And today's movie is Godzilla. I'm not going to... I don't think I have to say anything else. You all know what movie I'm talking about, clearly, when I say Godzilla, and no other identifiers on it.
Yeah, why bother paring it down?
Why bother explaining it? No, it's the 2014 Godzilla, not to be confused with about 40 other films that were simply entitled Godzilla. Just to get this out of the way, Hero Talk is a spoiler podcast, and as you know, we will try to keep it to the movie at hand, but anything that has been released is considered fair game and on the table. Alright, so I had two things I really wanted to see in this movie. One was Bryan Cranston, and the other was Godzilla. And I felt like I didn't get to see a whole lot of either one of those things in this movie. I don't know, maybe that was just me. What'd you guys think?
I actually kind of liked what they did with Bryan Cranston's character. I thought he's being the guy that was right and that was justified, and that whole line about am I correct that it's going to send us back to the Stone Age line was that was in the trailer? I'm pretty sure I remember that. See, yeah. I actually kind of thought it was just the right amount. But I have to admit, I still had a bit of a when they zipped him into the body bag. I was like, oh, I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, it's like he was in the trailers an awful lot because he's in the trailer so much. But then like Aaron Taylor Johnson, who was the actual lead, up until the moment where I was sitting down and watching this movie, I didn't know he was in this movie.
No, me neither. In fact,
I haven't seen him in anything
I don't know
else.
that I've seen him in anything else exactly. I could probably Google it, but
I think probably he's most famous this day and age for Kick-Ass.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yes, of course. Yeah. As for how much Godzilla's in it, it could. I feel yes, there could have been more Godzilla on screen. However, I think they kind of did that on purpose to set the stage for gratuitous Godzilla in the follow-ups.
Right.
So
I mean, I know it was intentional, it wasn't accidental, but I mean, some of it is, they need to build up for him so much, but you're almost an hour into this movie before Godzilla even shows up. And this was driving me nuts. And I have seen people do reviews, so I know that I am late to the bus on this one. But I mean, every single time, like it seems like every time Godzilla's about to do something, like Godzilla shows up and he's like "rawr," or in his Godzilla scream, which I can't do, and maybe I'll put one in there when I edit this. I don't know. But when Godzilla does his scream, and then, the Motu shows up, and the Motu does his thing, you're like, oh boy, I'm about to see these guys throw down. And then, cut to the next day, and they're talking about, wow, that was some fight last night in Honolulu, huh? I'm sitting there looking at my screen, and I'm honestly thinking, yeah, boy, it's a good thing I'm not watching this movie or anything where I'd want to see that.
To me, I kind of liked, and I'm someone who gets very impatient with movies. I have movie ADD, so I get bored very quickly. But to me, the fact that there was enough tension where I wasn't getting bored, and I'm sure part of that has to do with the fact that I've loved Godzilla since I was a little kid, and I was just so excited to see him again in a new movie, and I was just on the edge of my seat until I did see him. And then once I did, it made all the wait worth it, and to me it almost built it up and made that even more gratifying. And I think that all of the scenes that we did see with him were so good and so over the top that I didn't want too much of that. I would have felt like it would have been overkill for the first new Godzilla. By all means, the next one, if they want to start it right off the bat, fine. But it was like an epic return, and I was okay with that build-up.
Yeah, I just think the reason I think I maybe wanted to see him up there a little bit sooner is because the sooner you can show that this is not the 1998 Matthew Broderick Godzilla, the faster you just show him right at the beginning and go see, totally different. We're not playing that game now. You can forget about that one. That one got us, I say us being Americans, made fun of, and not one, but two Japanese Godzilla movies. I think Godzilla 2000, they made fun of us, and then in Godzilla World Tour, they made fun of us again.
And they have every right.
They sure do, yeah. In Godzilla World Tour, I think Godzilla actually literally killed our Godzilla. And it took them 2 seconds to do. Like they bought the rights, straight up,
Please kill him.
You know what I mean? Like, they bought him just so they could kill him. And then in 2000, I think there was some throwaway line where, because there was a Godzilla tracking unit or something, and they said, "Hey, didn't Godzilla strike New York?" And like one of the guys says, "No, that was just something else, but the Americans don't know what they're talking about," and they just called it Godzilla.
Oh, that's funny.
And you're just shaking your head, and you're like, "Yes, yeah, we're sorry about that.
Sorry about that.
That was our fault."
My bad.
Yeah, so kind of nice to see Godzilla like doing stuff and being Godzilla, and you know,
Looking
maybe
like Godzilla, sounding like Godzilla.
yeah, facing off against monsters and not Matthew Broderick. I don't know. Call me a purist, but I just think Matthew Broderick doesn't really strike me as a worthy opponent.
Not so much.
And none of the little baby Godzilla raptor scenes.
Oh, God.
Oh, those are terrible. But anyway, we are not talking about that movie. We're talking about this movie. So this movie, now the director is Gareth Edwards. I have to be honest with you, I had never heard of this guy until he was assigned to this movie. I even look at his IMDb page because I'm like, oh, so who is this guy? And I'm looking, like, I have no clue.
Yeah.
Any of this stuff, like
yeah.
Heroes and Villains, a TV documentary. No, I didn't see it. Like the movie Monsters, didn't see it. Like honestly, the first thing on this guy's IMDb that I've seen is Godzilla.
Yeah.
And
Who
he's also doing he's doing some Star Wars thing.
Yeah.
And then once
standalone,
and then when that's done, he's gonna do Godzilla 2. Because I think they've straight up said this is going to be a trilogy at the very least, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So while there was no monsters that we truly recognized in this one, the Motus were unique for this movie, which I think is fine. I know some people just wanted to see maybe some of the monsters that we've come to see over the years, but I think just introduce Godzilla first.
Yep.
And then you can worry about giving enough appropriate screen time to some of these other monsters.
Yeah, because if you're going to do an origin story, you kind of have to make the villain of it villain. you got to kind of make the opponent in it. You can't waste an opportunity to use one of the big names like a Mothra or Rodan or whatever in the first one and just have them like. And yes, the Mutos were a worthy opponent as a pair, but I think it'd be crazy not to save those bigger ones for the follow-ups.
Yeah. Keep those for the sequels, because you got, let's see, you mentioned Mothra and Rodan, which are two big ones, which I think Legendary actually licensed for the new movies. And I want to say, who's the third? The King
Probably
Gamora? Ghidorah,
yeah.
Who was known as something else in North America, and even though I've only ever seen the North American versions of these movies, I still kind of know him as King Ghidorah, and I don't know why.
Well, it's a proper name anyway, so we'll go with it.
Yeah, that's what I'm going with. Notably absent is one of my personal favorites, which is Mecha Godzilla. So I guess we'll save that one for movie 4 when they jump the shark. But
straight to video Godzilla.
They can go back to making fun of us.
Yeah, but you know what? Mecha Godzilla can make funnable, and if they're gonna do Mothra, I have to say you need to get twin geisha singers to sing Mothra onto the scene when Mothra shows up. You have to do it. Find some way to make that happen. Maybe Mothra just happens to show up when two geisha girls are singing a song, and that's how I don't care. You need to.
Work it into like the Japan equivalent of like Japan Idol, and they're like a twin act.
They're on stage.
And then Mothra just happens to like crash the studio.
Yeah, you have to find some way. Listen, I know nothing about Mothra, or I shouldn't say no. I've seen the movies, but I remember nothing about Mothra outside of those two singers.
That is by far the most memorable part of it.
I agree. This was kind of back in the Godzilla in his early days was. It is a he, right? Is Godzilla a male? I don't remember.
Yes.
I think yeah.
Yeah.
Let's just go with that.
Yeah, Godzilla in his early days was a little cheesy. When it was the dude in the suit.
Sure.
I still remember. I think the first movie came out, wasn't it in 54?
54, yeah.
Yeah.
And then in 56, they added scenes and released it. They added scenes with Raymond Burr and released it in North America.
And then Raymond Burr actually came back in another sequel, which they did the same thing, is they took the Japanese movie and then they added additional scenes with Raymond Burr coming back. And once again, it's the continuity is convoluted. So I think there's something to be said for eventually saying, okay, all that other stuff happened. We're going to make something new now. And Godzilla is still Godzilla, and he's still going to do the atomic breath and all that other stuff. But we're going to try to get rid of the history. And they did, for some intents and purposes, they did acknowledge the history in that Godzilla first started showing up in 1954.
In the 50s, yeah.
Now, the explanation was ridiculous in that it was the USS Nautilus that woke him up because of the nuclear power on board. And they're like, oh, because he went down to the depth. And I'm thinking, the Nautilus, now it's a museum now. It's welded to a pier somewhere in Connecticut, and you can go on it. And I've been on it. It was not a deep submergence vessel. So it really couldn't go all that deep. Like, was Godzilla just hanging at just a couple feet under the surface?
He's a light sleeper, Greg.
I'm just saying, like, I really would have thought that maybe it would have taken more to wake Godzilla, but that's apparently all it took. So it was a little ridiculous. Yeah,
I really was expecting something like, oh, well, the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs woke him up, or something like that. But yeah, the explanation they came up with for the 50s was not, I don't know, not very convincing. Nor was the footage very interesting. I think, did we see like the tops of the couple of spines sticking out of one explosion and some of that? Like,
yeah, there was right at the very beginning. They showed that they were trying to blow him up, which that was what they ended up saying is all of our atomic testing was actually just trying to blow up Godzilla. Which you shake your head because you're like, we set off a bunch of those in the desert. Was Godzilla in the desert? Maybe he was. I don't know. Anyway, huge presence by the United States Navy in this movie.
Yeah.
Apparently, and I heard this through the grapevine, and by the grapevine I mean on Wikipedia. But I guess they wanted the Marines to be more involved, and the Marines were all upset that it was the Navy, and so they wouldn't be involved. And you're thinking like, eventually you run that chain up high enough, you guys do join. Like your two branches do come together.
Yeah.
I mean, the Secretary of the Navy is where they join. So yeah, it's pretty high up, but still, like, well, we're not going to be in some Navy movie.
If we can get Sony and Marvel to cooperate, surely we can get the Navy and the Marine Corps.
At this point, nothing's off the table. Sony and Marvel were able to shake hands. I'm not ruling out that Warner Brothers and Disney are going to get together and finally do a JLA Avengers movie. And I would watch that movie as whatever. Like, that movie is just your license to print money at that point. And you got to do it. You do it just like Roger Rabbit. You let Disney handle everything and just give them the rights to the characters.
Yeah. Let them run with it.
You let them do it. You just say, here's our character, and you have whatever stipulations you want. Like, Thor and Superman need equal screen time, and Captain America and Batman need equal screen time, whatever. But anyway, what movie are we talking about? Oh, Godzilla. Yeah. Man, we are going all off the deep end. So here's another character from the movie. I am a little bit embarrassed about this. So Dr. Ashiro Shirazawa, who was named after one of the characters from the original movie, I believe. That was Dr. Daisuke Shirazawa. He was played by Ken Watanabe. I did not recognize Ken Watanabe in this film, and I am a huge Ken Watanabe fan. And the whole time I'm thinking, like, this guy looks so familiar. And I came to realize I have never seen Ken Watanabe in a movie with hair before.
Yeah, no, I was about to say that's why I didn't recognize him. Well, two reasons. One, the hair thing took me a while. The second thing was I'm a fan of Ken Watanabe too. I always considered him to be a rather imposing physical specimen, particularly remembering back to Last Samurai. He seemed like a haggard, tiny version
a little
of himself.
schlubby, yeah. I mean, I guess credit to him as an actor, because every time I see Ken Watanabe, he owns the room he's in.
Yeah.
And then suddenly he's in this scene where like no one's listening to him, and you're almost like, well, that can't be Ken Watanabe, because otherwise people would be listening to the guy.
Yeah. I was shocked. Like, I thought, wow, how can he not be towering over everybody in his presence? But the main thing was the hair and possibly the spectacles.
I didn't recognize him, and he was in the movie an awful lot, as well. He should be. I mean, he's a great actor to have, and he's a good guy to get around. Bryan Cranston. Now, I'm just going to talk. We've already kind of mentioned Bryan Cranston and his character, but he has probably one of the most powerful scenes in the movie.
Oh God.
Absolutely impractical from an actual operation standpoint. But this powerful scene where he has to lock his wife into what I have to imagine is the reactor compartment of this thing. It's the setup of this reactor is something that I was really having a hard time following. But they set up, and then he's doing it because this radioactive steam was coming towards him. And so he shuts the whole thing, and then his wife shows up at the door, and she's A-okay because she's wearing her radiation suit. By the way, folks at home, let's just disclaimer here. Those are not radiation suits. Those are contamination suits. They don't stop radiation. And you know what else they don't stop? Steam.
Steam, yeah.
So the idea that, she would be locked in the reactor compartment that she went into when it was hot for some reason, and then the radioactive steam busts out because she went in when it was hot, again, for some reason, and then she gets sealed in, and then she can be standing there, encased in steam, which I gotta imagine is several hundred degrees hot,
yeah,
and is A-okay, and then was able to take her hood off, which, the magical hood that had somehow been stopping the radioactive steam this whole time, in order to, say goodbye. And she stands there and is not being scolded and burned and is not screaming.
Yeah.
You ignore all that other stuff. Very powerful moment.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that could have improved it is if she'd slapped the Vulcan sign onto the window and, slid down.
The needs
slowly.
of the many outweigh the needs of the few.
All jokes aside, that scene, I was ready to cry right off the bat. Damn, this movie's going to be pretty emotional. That was a very good scene.
It's a very strong scene.
I don't have the knowledge that you have, so none of that would have occurred to me.
Yeah, see, the problem with me, my engineer mind looks at this stuff and is thinking I'm trying to piece together how this reactor works as I'm watching it. And the whole time I'm thinking that's so impractical.
Yeah.
Why would he just send them in there when it didn't seem like it was real enough for me. And so I had a bit of an issue with that. I recognize the scene was good, but I'm still upset about the whole idea that the suits are somehow blocking radiation. They don't do that. So,
fair enough.
Yeah. So that's just me. That's how I look at all these movies. Whenever I see mechanical parts or things like this, I think about how these things would actually work. And there was a lot of that going on in this movie that had me. And I drive myself nuts. I pause the movie when these things happen. I will sit here and pause the movie and be like, now these pipes in the background, what do you think those are for? And then something stupid will happen, and I'm like, okay, so let me think. Is this even plausible? Could this happen this way? I don't think it could. Go ahead. Go.
No, I just thinking more about how you were disappointed that he wasn't in it more. I understand why, because he's a very good actor, and like you said, they did promote that he was going to be in it a lot in the trailer. But I think with movies like this, especially like a Godzilla movie, I prefer lesser known actors and actresses in it. And I think it's kind of better that he had a smaller role because I don't want anyone to stand out too much. And even though I've never watched Breaking Bad, he's just so recognizable that to me that would have stood out a little too much. I really liked that I didn't know Aaron Taylor-Johnson. Elizabeth Olsen I've seen in one horror movie, loved her in it, called Silent House.
But she didn't do a whole lot of anything.
Right, and that wasn't too big of a star either.
But, I have a pretty big issue with that, is that, you set up this guy's family, and Sam goes to a shelter, and then Elizabeth Olsen spends the rest of the movie just reacting to whatever building she's in getting crushed by Godzilla or the Motus, like they're drawn to her by some kind of magic.
Get the wife.
Yeah, and that's all she basically was doing, was just kind of wherever she was getting threatened by something or someone. I just thought, Elizabeth Olsen is way more talented than what you've given her to do in this movie. Yeah. So the female part was a bit underwritten, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
I have to say, with a comment towards the wider cast in general, most everyone in it was pretty good. The one thing that this movie did that I was pretty happy about was the thing that puts me off about most disaster movies is the tendency to have a huge sprawling cast that they have to spend all sorts of time bouncing back and forth to, and they did, and happily they didn't do that in this movie. They that was one of the things I despised about Independence Day, was how they had to jump around to this guy and this guy and this guy.
Everyone's doing their own thing, but they're all interconnected. Yeah, and here it basically came down to, it was like, well, you had Ford, who was out there just trying to get back, and fortunately he's apparently the only EOD guy left on the entire West Coast, because he keeps getting lumped along for all these missions. But that's what you do. So he's just trying to get back, and then you get all the folks that are on the boat. I say on the boat, but I think they ended up hitting land at some point. The timetable of the movie was a little iffy for me.
Yeah.
Because it seemed like they hit landfall, but I'm pretty sure they hit landfall at some point after they set the 90-minute timer on those nukes, but they still had time to organize the Halo drop, and
Yeah.
I think the timetable was probably the result of all the rewrites this movie saw. Because it saw a lot of rewrites.
Yeah, I was reading that, and I was like, it doesn't have the stench of movies that typically have.
I mean, it's not Batman Returns.
No.
But there's definitely a lot of different flavors and things that show up and then resolve, and there is a little bit of that, and I think some of that is, all right, so where are they actually right now? Are they on the boat? I don't know if they're on the boat yet. And now, correct me if I'm wrong, the carrier they were on, didn't they actually label that as the USS Saratoga?
Saratoga, yeah.
Now, because I'm me,
did you figure out how fast it was?
No, I popped onto the internet. The USS Saratoga was decommissioned in 1994.
Why would they use it then? Like
the only thing I'm thinking of, and this is just me, shrugging my shoulders, because the Saratoga has been decommissioned. It's another ship that is welded to the pier, and it is its own museum, and you can go to it in Rhode Island.
Maybe they didn't want to use the name of something that's actually active now.
My only thought was that since the Motus were going after nuclear power, they wanted to use a non-nuclear powered naval carrier, and the Saratoga was not nuclear powered. So,
otherwise, Godzilla, when it was swimming along next to it, would have turned and taken a bunch out of it.
Otherwise, because I did have that original thought, and this is when I went back and checked, because when they talk about, like, when the Motu gets the Akula sub right outside Hawaii, Akula is a Russian sub, so, hey, Russians, how about you stop spying on Hawaii, huh?
Yeah.
You see how well that worked out for you? Yeah, so when the Motu's chomping on it, I'm thinking to myself, like, why wouldn't the Motu go to the carrier? Because the carrier would have had a nuclear reactor, right? I'm pretty sure they all do now. So then I went back and I looked, and like, the USS Saratoga. So that's why I did what I did and looked it up to think, like, is that, like, does the Navy have any carriers out there that aren't nuclear at this point? I don't know. So I went to good old Wikipedia. So this might be true, might not be true. But they said it was decommissioned in 94. So now I'm shaking my head going, just use one of the ones that they actually filmed on. Like, you can look that up. They filmed on a couple of active carriers. They just said it was the Saratoga.
Maybe in this alternative timeline, the Saratoga was seconded to this organization that hunts Motos specifically because it doesn't have nuclear.
Maybe it was
propulsion.
Decommissioned. Wink, wink.
Mm.
So that makes me wonder, in the Godzilla universe, what is the ship that's welded to the pier as museum in Rhode Island? So anyway, that's enough nitpicking about those things. Like, this is just, again, if it was anybody else who didn't care enough to look it up, that'd be one thing. But it's me, and so I'm actually trying to follow the science of the movie, and that's my number one issue.
Yeah.
Is I gotta stop doing that. But anyway, so let's talk the Mutos for briefly. I don't. Is there anyone else in the cast you really want to discuss? I don't think anybody really stood out to me outside of them.
They're competent.
What a backhanded thing to say.
Well, I mean, nobody else.
You weren't terrible.
Nobody else really stood out to me, to be honest. I mean, I know Juliette Binoche, but they used her to kill her off in 5 minutes, and
so I guess you guys were good at not screwing the movie up.
I think I recognized the Admiral, maybe.
But see, again, like, I don't want huge recognizable people. To me, it's a Godzilla movie, and he's the big star, and that's it. And I don't really care that much about the people. Maybe that sounds really sad, but
yeah. Well, I mean, you have the problem with all of these movies, and I say these movies, I'm not just strictly talking Godzilla, but movies where you have these larger than life entities in them, is that you need to kind of create these human characters for you to nominally follow. And they have to do this with horror movies all the time. And it's like nobody cares about the teenagers who are going on the overnight trip down to the cabin. They care about Jason. However, if you don't have these characters, Jason's got nothing to do.
Yeah,
and nobody's
absolutely.
reacting to Jason, and now it's just some dude in the woods with a mask, and nobody wants to see that movie.
Well, no, I think the cast was really well put together, and I think everyone did a really good job. I have no complaints.
No, I did like Ford in this movie. Taylor Johnson. Yeah,
I think perfect.
Mm-hmm. I think he was good. Now, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, I should say, he was actually offered the part, and he turned it down.
Yeah, I heard that. I kind of laughed.
Yeah. I think he would have. I think he would have done fine with it. I don't think it would have been too much of an issue. But
I thought it made a lot more sense to have a younger man who is more, towards the start of his military career. Ghost of Jordan Levitt has got to be a good 10 years older than this guy.
yeah.
So
I
think it was a better choice.
Yeah, Ford was. They called him. He's a lieutenant, right?
Yeah, and the age given how long was his father? Sorry, it was meant to be
15 years after.
15 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could believe him.
He was like what, 25, I guess.
He's 24. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, the actor's 24. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what the character was meant to be.
I don't remember how old Sam was, the kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. It wasn't in a whole lot, but yeah, I liked him in it. In fact, I liked him in this more than some other stuff that he's been in. He's actually I'm gonna give him a plug. He's coming up in the new Avengers movie too. He plays Quicksilver.
Oh yeah.
Oh, wow.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. So I recently rewatched the Captain America Winter Soldier, where they show Quicksilver in the first stinger for that movie. I said spoilers. All right, listen. It's a stinger. Just chill. But they show him in it, and I even was looking there to see if I could recognize him, and man, I can barely recognize this guy from like the roles he had when he was younger. I don't know, maybe it's just because he's getting older and like he's getting rid of his teenage face, but
yeah, maybe. I mean, he certainly looks different. I mean, you mentioned Kick-Ass.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't. You would think that would immediately jump out at me because he's the
central character, the titular character there.
Yeah,
but yeah, I actually quite liked him in this, and I think, although again it was a little odd that he's the only EOD guy ever, so he has to be in all these situations with the Motus and Godzilla showing up. But at the same time, he does at least serve a purpose. It's not like it just happens to happen to him. They're just, hey, I'm EOD, and all right, well then, congratulations, you're on the mission. And
he's also a very likable kind of hero character.
Yeah. Now, do they ever outright say that he's like? I know he says U.S. Navy, but I mean, is he a SEAL? Because
just says lieutenant.
He just says
Navy.
lieutenant, and he says EOD, and But it just seemed like he was really familiar with things like, jumping out of a plane for a halo jump.
Yeah.
that maybe a SEAL would be a lot more familiar with than,
yeah.
Maybe you're just your run-of-the-mill EOD. I don't know exactly how the EOD runs around and does things for the U.S. Navy. But that's just my question. I thought he was a SEAL. In my head, he was a SEAL. I'm going to go ahead and say he was a SEAL because guy was using all kinds of guns and guy knew how to do halo jumps and stuff like that. And that just said SEAL to me, so I assumed he was a Navy SEAL, but I didn't know if that ever got established, and I just didn't notice or not.
Yeah.
So I don't know if anybody was savvy enough to see like a SEAL patch on his uniform at the beginning of the movie or anything like that.
Nah.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I even remember when he said like, I'm Lieutenant something U.S. Navy, and I remember even thinking like, I don't remember his rank insignia.
Yeah, no, me neither.
So I'm sitting there like, I thought he was some private that jumped out. Like, oh, he's an officer. Oh, okay, because he looks young. So I kind of anyway. Yeah, I liked him quite a bit in this movie. But what did you think of the Motus? Now I'm going to ask you, Jen, because you're sort of between the three of us. I think you probably have the most Godzilla. I don't know if experience. I've seen quite a few of them as well, but you probably the most affluent on Godzilla. So I don't know. What did you think of the Motus?
I liked them. I felt like they were a very appropriate type monster for him to fight. The only thing I felt like was that they looked a little too mechanical. Mm-hmm. The heads and like the faces of them to me looked more Transformer than.
Yeah, now that you say that, they looked very much like some of the Transformers that you would see in the Bay films.
Like a mechanical sort of machine head.
Yeah.
So other than that, I was fine. I really didn't care. Mm-hmm. But I liked that they still had the bad guy aura even against Godzilla, where you were rooting for Godzilla and you wanted him to kill them and you wanted him to be the kind of hero to take them out. They did that. They executed that perfectly because whenever you have another monster, you take on that like almost sympathy for Godzilla and rooting for him, even though he's supposed to be this awful monster that could kill everyone.
Yeah.
You kind of switch into that. Yeah, go Godzilla. And they did that perfectly. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, I think they did.
That's really my only issue.
Yeah, they did a good job in the movie of establishing that Godzilla isn't a bad guy. He's a force of nature. And when these other things show up, it's kind of his place is he shows up to get rid of them. And that's That's his thing. He just hunts the other giant thing. The other, what do they call them? Kaijus in Japan. Yeah. I like the term muto, I should say.
Muto, yeah.
Muto, a massive unidentified terrestrial organism.
Yep.
And I think, it would make sense if they kept using that in the next movies to describe, Rodan, because they would also be unidentified terrestrial organisms, right? Unless they were, they came from space, but I don't really think we're ready to go there yet.
I do think that they will go out of their way to name them properly or individually.
I'm sure they will, but I think Muto just becomes like the term, like
umbrella.
we have this new Muto, we've designated Mothra. There you
An
go.
umbrella term for
I like the term, but yeah, I mean, they do establish that Godzilla, he's not wrecking cities because he wants to. He's hunting the Mutos down and hunting the giant creatures down. I mean, he's just a force of nature that just leaves a path of destruction and wherever he goes. And I mean, I get it. I have a toddler. I understand how that works, so I can get behind that. I'm like, yeah, well, that's how it works. You know? If you had a toddler who was some 300 meters high, yeah, it'd do exactly what Godzilla was doing.
Probably.
Yeah. So Jeff, I got to ask you, what did you think of that hot Muto on Muto action?
Nuzzling.
In terms of the fight scenes, or
yeah, no, there was that mating scene where they lingered a little longer than I was comfortable with. Like, okay, guys, I don't actually want to know the mechanics of how this is going to work, so can we just...
They nuzzled their, machine heads together for a second.
Yeah. And then they cut away like they always do for the good parts.
Yeah.
PG-13, but... Yeah, they lingered too long. Like, they get together and it's like, okay, we get it. We know. You don't need to show anything right now, please. Can you show the girl again screaming or something? That's all she did. She screamed, but is extremely good at finding her family in large crowded arenas.
Yes, she is.
Yeah, all of 10, 20 seconds when she got on the scene to spot him.
Yeah, I know. She was right there. And that looked like a pretty big stadium. I'm assuming it's where the 49ers play.
Yeah.
Hang on. Levi's Stadium? Does that sound right? Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I'm assuming that's where that was supposed to be, because it's certainly not AT&T Park.
No.
No.
Yeah, it was.
Or Candlestick.
Yeah. Look at us dropping names. We know sports here. Yeah, I thought that was a little weird. So now Godzilla and the Mutos, they have that last battle, right? The one that's in San Francisco proper, but other than the Hawaii one, which I've already mentioned, kind of happens entirely in a news broadcast being sleepily watched by Sam later. Was there another battle I actually missed?
Not between the monsters. Like there were some scenes where the female Muto was taking on a squad of Marines in a train.
Yeah, she was in Las Vegas, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
they
crashed at a mountain, went straight to Vegas.
which is what you do. I mean, honestly, if I awoke for the first time in however many thousand years, and I was that close to Vegas, that'd probably be my first stop too.
Hell yeah.
So I can't blame her. I don't understand why the female would not have wings and the male would, other than the male needs to find a way to get to where he's going, and the female needed to find a way to make sure she stayed landlocked so that they could actually meet at San Francisco.
I mean, sexual dimorphism works out in nature, but to be that extreme where one has different abilities than the other like that seems a bit odd. But
yeah, I mean, listen, I don't know the science of how Mutos work. So
I think it was too tempting for them to have one fly. That's just such a standard in Godzilla movies for one of his enemies or more to be flying that it would have been pretty irresistible.
Right.
Yeah.
So
no, I'm pretty familiar with Godzilla and his standard set of abilities. He seemed weaker in this than he has been in some of his other, maybe more conventional appearances in the Japanese films. I mean, I have seen a movie where Godzilla stands and takes an asteroid to the face, and the thing levels the entire city he's standing in, and Godzilla is just standing there and shrugging it off like nothing happened. And then these Mutos are just kind of pushing him around a little bit, and he's just flailing on the ground. And in my head, I'm thinking, you took an asteroid to the face, and it was like nothing happened.
Like a boss.
Now, I mean, he's done some silly things. Like he's used his atomic breath to like launch himself like a rocket in the past. So I understand you can't necessarily take all of that as being absolute to the Godzilla mythos, but
I don't want to use the word realism in a film about giant monsters, but I do get the sense, in all seriousness, that they are trying for these creatures, and I'm assuming they will do so in the second films, which will be interesting, to have them grounded in how do you say
to limit the stretching of the disbelief, I guess, is the best way to say. Like, you get one miraculous exception, and that miraculous exception is that this thing exists in the first place. So anything else you do needs to be in reality, because you used your get-out-of-jail-free card to make me believe that there was a prehistoric alpha predator giant atomic breathing lizard. So when you see a building fall on him and him be a bit, yeah, exactly. The building falls on him, and I'm like, I have seen you. You took nukes. I basically, I might be stealing Jen's joke, but I basically saw that as like a honey badger nap. The honey badger in nature is known to, like, after a particularly vicious fight, rest up, and then somehow survive and live to fight another day. Yeah, he felt sleep it off. He felt a little underpowered, and the flying Muto, he died in a particularly quick and silly way as well. Yeah. Like I went back and watched it a couple times just to make sure, like, I didn't miss something that was far more brutal than what I actually saw. And I'm like, no, he just got hit with Godzilla's tail into a building.
It was just like a fire. It was just like a fly swatter.
Yeah, basically.
Squish.
You're sitting there like, well, that was you couldn't do that in Honolulu. I guess it wasn't actually Honolulu; it was on Hawaii. But still, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Speaking of Honolulu scene, though, this bothered me. All right, if a tsunamis coming, you don't just leave your dog tied to a tree.
Oh my god, I was so sad. I was like, Jeff can attest to this. I was like, oh, doggy, run.
Yeah. Did the dog not immediately get away after that?
Oh yeah, the dog got away. They showed specifically the dog broke off the leash and ran past all the people. And I think you're supposed to believe, and I'm choosing to believe, that the dog got away.
Yeah.
But still, whoever's dog that was, you're a terrible dog owner and a terrible person.
Yep.
And I hope that Godzilla killed you.
Yep.
Well, odds are.
Yeah. I'm just saying, I hope that whoever tied the dog to the tree and then left him there and didn't go back to get him and just ran away, I hope that person's dead.
Yeah. My only other problem with the Hawaii scene, other than the cutaway, which we've covered,
yeah, we've talked about the cutaway,
was the group of about 10 soldiers who decided that small arms fire was the answer.
In every single one of these, I understand when you want to have a military presence in these movies. But, I have to believe that even when your orders are to engage the enemy, like, once it just starts shrugging off your bullets, you would think whoever was there would just call to their superiors and be like, okay, so the guns aren't working. What else you got? Instead of we're just going to keep shooting them. It looks silly, and it happened more than once in this movie where everyone's just, like, shooting standard weapons that don't work at the creature over and over again. Like, even when, like, people are, like, they're doing the halo jumps and the whatnot, they have your standard military layout of equipment. I think at one point, Ford actually pulls out a 9mm.
Yeah, he does.
Like, okay, so what are you gonna do? Tickle it to death?
He was literally doing the same move that Martin Lawrence does in one of the Bad Boys films on an highway overpass, like on his back, like pointing towards. Pointing towards the screen. And I'm like, what does he think that's going to accomplish?
Yeah, it's an overused cliche, and I just think in a real life situation where the giant prehistoric creatures were destroying everything, the members of the U.S. military would probably figure it out a little faster.
Well, they had already witnessed them destroy a city and a half and eat a couple of warheads at that point too. So
now, why didn't they eat all the warheads? Other than the story needed one warhead.
I guess they were full. I don't know.
That was really weird to me when that happened, because they're like, oh, there's one warhead left. And I'm like shaking my head like, what? How? Why would it leave the one? I don't know. Crazy Mutos. All right. Before I talk about like the final Muto battle and Godzilla doing his big finish, and I won't spoil that on our own podcast. We'll talk about it in a little bit. There was this weird, and I don't know if this is just the result of all the rewrites, but when Ken Watanabe introduces Godzilla, and he specifically says we called him Gojira.
Gojira, yeah.
Which you have to, because that's what they would call him. And so he says Gojira, and then later he says Godzilla, and then everyone else starts saying Godzilla, and then he goes back to Gojira. And maybe did I miss something? Was there at some point when they decided, like, okay, so he's Gojira, we're not going to call him that, we're going to call him something else? And then he gets on board with that for a couple of hours, and he thinks like, nope, I got to stay true to my homeland, and then goes back to Gojira. Like, that was just...
I didn't even notice that.
Yeah. When he says and introduces his name and he says Gojira,
yeah,
that in my head started the line of logic of, all right, so I need to trace when they switch from Gojira to Godzilla. And the next time his name is spoken, it is spoken by the same character again, except this time he calls him Godzilla.
I gotta put that down to poor editing or something.
Yeah, you would think it's some
like English interpretation of Gojira. Like, is that just the English word for it?
I think basically, yeah, that it worked better as Godzilla than Gojira, and they're phonetically similar. And I would believe that if he says Gojira, and then the Americans just start saying Godzilla.
Yeah, why not?
But if he slips...
he's the first one who says Godzilla. And he's the one who introduced him as Gojira, and then everyone else starts calling him Godzilla, and then he goes back to Gojira.
Yeah.
And so
maybe they felt they needed more people saying it for trailers and things like that, or
I guess it just made me shake my head and think, okay, and maybe I missed it, but I was trying to pay attention to it just so I could catch it, and it really did feel like suddenly we were just calling him Godzilla for no other reason than because that's the name of the movie.
Well, I think to Americans it is just Godzilla, so they were going to stick with that. But yeah, I bet more than anything, they just really wanted the official Gojira line in there once, and then they were kind of done with it. Like, just to throw it in, but all along it was going to be Godzilla.
Right.
It's one of those things.
There needed to be some string that connected those two to show.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, like I said, I'd be pretty forgiving. You don't need to explicitly say it to me, but if it was only the American people saying Godzilla and Ken Watanabe was the only one saying Gojira, I could totally buy it as it was just a translation deal, and these guys weren't going to say the name, they translated it. But Ken Watanabe was the first person to speak the word Godzilla, and that was what kind of got me like, no, wait, why did you change it?
Yeah, because they could have cut to like some military guy misunderstanding going, was this the Godzilla? Like, and it just goes from there. But yeah, there was no explanation for that.
So that kind of irked me, and I needed to at least bring that up. That was I really wanted to see that go better. So now let's talk. All right, so Godzilla versus the female Muto. Again, even in the Mutos in general, I'm kind of upset. First of all, that Godzilla didn't just immediately destroy them, because he's Godzilla. I mean, he's the alpha predator, right? And it seemed like that these two things would have killed him if it wasn't for some punk American EOD guy who happened to set off an explosion nearby. And then so Godzilla's able to like kill the flying one. And then I guess he forgot that the mother was still around or something, because he seemed like the mother had plenty of time to figure out what she was doing and go do something else. It just, when this is the final showdown and this is what you're finally showing me Godzilla doing some stuff, I really kind of felt like I wanted to see Godzilla not be in peril.
And just completely throw down.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted...
I was really sad when I thought he just dead.
Really?
Yeah. You can ask Jeff. I was like, no.
Well,
and then he opened his eyes, so I was like, yeah.
you knew he was going to be alive in the end. But
right.
Yeah, it was a weird way to end it, him being, like, mortally...
yeah,
I was... to make him more sympathetic, because you're kind of supposed to keep rooting for him, because we're going to see him against all these other monsters.
And I guess when listen, I'm okay if when he goes to fight Rodan, it's rough, and he gets this beat up a little bit. But these Mutos, like these guys, I mean, they're the job squad. These guys are just there.
These are AAA monsters.
Yeah.
in the franchise. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like these guys, they're just there to make Godzilla look good. And I think the idea that Godzilla likely may have had an issue and may have been killed if it wasn't for that very convenient explosion, just to make us feel good, I guess. Just go, yeah, America, we saved Godzilla. I didn't like that. I wanted, and I'm okay with Godzilla like having to figure out how to get the upper hand against the two guys. I would have liked it if Godzilla did that on his own without the use of a convenient plot device.
Yeah. I kind of wish that they had gone with the Jurassic Park ending of him, standing over his vanquished foe and screaming his lungs out like the
Oh
T-Rex.
yeah, like yeah.
Instead of getting up after a hard night, dusting himself off and trudging back into the ocean.
Yeah, I really would have rather that he pulled himself up by his bootstraps and wrecked the other Mutos, and then let loose the big old Godzilla scream, and just went back to the ocean like, and I guess I'm done here. Just him falling down for no really good reason, and then taking a long nap. I wasn't a big fan of that. So, and I guess maybe that's why I'm kind of lukewarm on the movie, is because I just wanted to see Godzilla. And when you finally show me Godzilla, you show me Godzilla getting beat up by some guys we just made up. It's not Rodan, it's not Mothra, it's not Mechagodzilla, it's just some guys.
I think perhaps they're getting caught up with it's a common thing in movies to have a character shown to be vulnerable, right? And then be in peril and then overcome it. But I don't know that that's the best course of action.
Well, it not always.
in a Godzilla movie with Godzilla himself.
We on Hero Talk have talked about this with Equilibrium, where you were able to end that movie with a very good scene at the end without showing your hero in unnecessary peril, but just showing he's able to overcome. You can make it a very compelling scene without having to show how's he going to get the upper hand? Oh, good thing that thing exploded.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of how he killed the female Muto, I was a fan.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Me too.
Well, I tell you, I didn't see it coming. I knew that he would bust out the radioactive breath at some point, or at least I was hoping. Mm-hmm. At that point, we're at the 80-minute mark, and I don't think I'd seen much in the way of breath. But
yeah, he used it once on the female before the male showed up.
Yeah.
And this was I had the closed captioning on, so it was really kind of odd because the closed captioning's on, and all of a sudden, this is what it calls it. When he starts to use it, it says atomic breath whirring.
No.
I'm like, I guess I'm about to see the atomic breath.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. He's a wind-up toy, you see.
Yeah, now I like the effect where all of his, and I don't remember if this happened in any of the other incarnations, or at least any of the more recent other incarnations, but did his spines always glow when he used the atomic breath?
New to me, but maybe Jen would know. She's good.
Yeah.
Not that I remember, but I have to admit, I watched all of these when I was very little. I'm talking 5, 6, 7 years old. So I don't remember, but I could see it very well being possible.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm thinking I remember something like that, and probably some electrical effects on his spines in some of the movies he did it. And then I think he has another next level atomic breath that's pretty intense. I think that one's red, but yeah.
When you think about it, it's the complete reverse Smaug. Smaug is the belly glow red.
Yeah.
And then Godzilla has the other side, electrical blue.
Well, so did the freaking Muto.
Yeah.
He had a glowing belly too.
Well, but that was her eggs, I believe.
Yeah.
That was her prego belly.
The way they were glowing was kind of interesting. Yeah. But no, I've seen a picture of, and I just remember this, I've seen a picture of Godzilla from one of the many, actual Japanese Godzilla movies where his spikes, if you will, were glowing. So I don't think, it may have only been that once, and I think it was in the 80s or 90s.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that actually has happened.
Yeah, I'm fairly certain now that I've thought about it that in the 80s or 90s, and some of those films, that's when they started doing it. I just couldn't remember if that was happening in the 60s. Probably not. As I imagine back then, his atomic breath was basically just a fire extinguisher hose coming out of the suit.
Yeah.
Yeah. not to interrupt, but I just read this. Apparently, Legendary's Godzilla is set to be featured as a playable character in Bandai Namco's PlayStation 3 / PlayStation 4 exclusive fighting game simply titled Godzilla. Have you guys heard of this?
No. I've not heard of this at all.
What?
It's Wikipedia, so take it with a grain of salt. But,
I mean, I wouldn't put it past them.
I mean, they've made a ton of Godzilla fighting games in the past, so. But
I don't think I've ever actually seen one.
No, there's been quite a few of them. None of them I don't think have ever done all that great.
When you say fighting, do you mean traditional like 6-button?
There's been a couple there have been like some like traditional 6-button fight.
Oh my god!
And then there's been some where you're like almost in an isometric city and you're fighting while you're also destroying the city as well. And
that I can kind of get, but the thought of having fire
Fire
down, forward, shuriken, Godzilla, back, forward, come on.
Yeah, I know. You know what? I think probably the best Godzilla video game is still just Rampage from the 80s.
Yeah, I gotta agree. In tribute, though, it is King Kong meets Godzilla.
Yeah.
Although, now that I think of it, the Godzilla in that game is probably a bit more 98 than it is
yeah, it
2014.
Still a fun game, though.
That's horrifying news, Jen. Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Anytime.
Well, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, you just brought us to a grinding halt.
I know.
There's this shock now. It's like, are we still trying to do this? Make the Godzilla fighting game happen? All right. Well, now that we're kind of past the tent poles of the film, and I think there's one key thing that we haven't discussed, and I know we're all in agreement on it because it would have come up otherwise. But what did you think of the Godzilla design in this movie?
I'll let you go first. Yeah.
Absolutely loved it. I don't think I have it. I liked that it was a little bit different, but it felt like such a throwback. Now, sure, I'm sure that part of it has to do with how bad the 98 one looked.
It was pretty bad, yeah.
Yeah, it was really bad. But when I saw him, I couldn't have been happier. I was thrilled. I thought he couldn't have looked better.
I like that when you look at him, you see Godzilla.
Absolutely.
Now, I'm kind of a fan of the late 90s, early 2000s where Godzilla is maybe a little bit thinner. The spines are a little bit more pronounced, and he's almost got a thinner, longer, more usable arm. However, again, because the purpose of this movie was to finally prove to Japan that America could make a Godzilla film.
Yeah.
And the idea that I looked at him and I saw Godzilla and he had the Godzilla scream and he did Godzilla stuff, then yes, absolutely, I am perfectly okay with the way he looked, and I was actually a pretty big fan. I don't know. What do you think, Jeff?
I really liked it. He was a little heavier set, if that's, you know what I mean, than I was expecting him to be. But he's not chunky Godzilla. He's just meteor. I mean, if he's supposed to be the alpha predator, then he looks the part, you know?
Yeah.
And it's certainly, there's no way you could possibly picture a humanoid operator inside a rubber suit anymore.
Right.
They've gone so far away from that towards making him look more like a proper lizard / animal that, I really liked it. It had all the hallmarks that you were expecting. It didn't, and on top, as somebody who doesn't really, I haven't seen anywhere near as many Godzilla films as you two have. Forgive me when I say that some of the older designs looked downright goofy.
No, that's true.
And this did not look goofy. This looked, like saurian, reptilian, whatever you want to use,
right.
And it looked like a proper monster. It didn't have the stupid grin that's almost there.
Yeah, no, I give you that. Yep. He kind of sometimes has that silly smile thing going.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was particularly, and this is what I probably paid attention to, because you can kind of have this body and get the face totally wrong. In the 98 one, we got the face totally wrong. I mean, the thing did not look at all like Godzilla or any representation of Godzilla. And oh man, I can still remember. You remember when they had all those promos for that movie and they showed this is how much bigger Godzilla is than the Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Yeah.
And no, it was still stupid. So it was still too small. And I want to say this Godzilla is actually, I've seen the size charts. I think this Godzilla was proportioned to be the largest Godzilla that they've ever had.
It was almost too big. Almost.
I would say almost. I mean, how big Godzilla needs to be really depends on how big Godzilla's fighting.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
But I don't so much like a Godzilla that towers over the skyscrapers, because I still want him to, interact with them and to knock them onto stuff. But I do like that he's a bit bigger, and so you don't get the same sense that, the smaller Godzilla was it was taken down by a couple of missiles, basically. Whereas this Godzilla, I feel, could have probably taken a couple of missiles and shrugged him off. As long as you didn't knock a building on him, then you'd have to take a nap.
No, the whole believability of this film was going to hinge on the design, and I was very pleased to see that they got that right, including the noise, which we all agree is also a very important component.
Oh yeah, it's the noise, the face, the mouth. I like that the mouth actually looks reptilian.
Yes, it really does.
Yeah, just to put it out there, because I think I tossed out 300 meters before, and that was off. He's actually about 150 meters tall, which is 500 feet, which is the tallest incarnation of Godzilla to date.
I know that we don't normally spend a lot of time speculating on sequels, but as glad as I am that they got the Godzilla design really nice and believable and yet respectful of the old design, I'm looking at the rest of the rogues gallery, shall we say?
Yeah.
I'm very concerned about their ability to be able to pull off a not ridiculous looking Mothra.
No, Mothra's the only one I'm truly worried about. They can do the other ones, but Mothra, you're just looking like, how do you not just make it a stupid giant moth?
Yeah.
And how am I supposed to be on, unless Mothra's the undercard for the fight with Rodan? That's the only other thing I could think of. But
yeah, because even have you ever seen an emperor moth up close?
Oh.
Yeah, it's not pretty.
No.
They basically just like big stupid versions of other moths. They're real. So how are they going to manage to pull it off? Mothra doesn't need to be terrifying because because it is kind of sort of alien looking, but I'm just worried it's going to look goofy because every time I Google Mothra, I look at the pictures and I just I can't help but just crack up. It's just so silly looking.
I know, but people, man, I'm telling you, people love Mothra.
Yeah.
Now me, I like Rodan. Maybe that's just me. And I think Rodan, you give Rodan the same treatment Godzilla got, and it'll look just as intimidating as Godzilla will.
No, it'll work.
Yeah, but I agree. Mothra, and the only way I can think of it works is Mothra isn't the main villain, for lack of a better word. That Mothra's just there to set up something else for Godzilla to do.
I think they're going to have to err on the side of making Mothra more insectoid rather than fuzzy.
Yes, you probably.
Well,
fuzzy.
I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but there was a movie with King Ghidorah that I believe Mothra and Rodan were all in, and it was 2 or 3 of them were up against the one. So it could be another one of those where Mothra is with Godzilla against whoever, and in that case the design might not be as important because it's a side thing.
I don't think I'm ready for Godzilla team-ups at this point.
I don't think I am either, but who knows, they might do it.
I think that back to the R word, the realism that I used earlier, I think if they're going to stick with a believable then it's going to be.
If you want to have a believable giant moth creature,
I think they're going to stick with the simple explanation of he's the apex predator and he's just naturally his instinct is just to kick ass and take these other things down, and none of this tag team stuff.
I really don't like any of the other ones, and I'm down for them all dying. So. I'm right there with you. I don't know what they'll do, though.
Godzilla must be the king. If anyone's going to help Godzilla, then let it be Gamera.
Gamera. Now that's one I don't remember at all.
Yeah, Gamera was its own. Gamera was the big giant turtle that was in its own set of monster movies, and I know of Gamera because Gamera was on a lot of the Mystery Science Theater 3000 movies, and that's how I know Gamera. So Godzilla I know because I was a fan of Godzilla movies, and Gamera I know because I'm a fan of schlocky comedy. So that should probably be your indication of how how important Gamera is next to Godzilla. King Kong is still up there too. I don't know if you can make that happen. I heard talk. Now the King Kong thing, that's just me talking out of my butt. But I heard talk like Legendary has the rights to Godzilla, and Legendary also has the rights to the Pacific Rim characters. And I've heard talks. Now this is just somebody, much like me, just talking out of his butt. But the Pacific Rim guys are saying like, man, wouldn't it be awesome if Godzilla would have some of our guys in it, or have some crossover with all of our monsters and Godzilla fighting them. And yeah, I guess it kind of would be, except if that works out that like Godzilla needs to pair up with the Jaegers. But I don't know. But then it doesn't really work because, okay, so hey, where were you guys when the Mudos were all running around, huh?
Yeah.
Really could have used your fellas there. And it doesn't work with the different, pardon the expression, the different universes. I guess the different lores that they've established, they don't work together. But I don't know. Yeah. Wasn't Pacific Rim like super into the future? Was that? I don't remember exactly.
Well, it enough into the future that I don't.
So I suppose if you want to do a crossover, again, we don't usually talk about hypothetical crossovers on Hero Talk, but if you wanted to do a crossover, probably the way you make that work is so after all this stuff happens, then all these creatures start popping up.
Yeah.
And then, at some point, somebody wakes up the original Godzilla, and then he shows up with everyone and, works with the Jaegers to try to take down the other things because he wants to. But all right, so it could work. And I think that'd be neat, and I'd like to see it because Pacific Rim was fun from what little I've seen of it. And I do intend to finally watch the whole movie one day, but that hasn't happened yet. Yeah, unfortunately, it's one of those movies that would be a good Hero Talk, so I won't watch it until I have to do so for a Hero Talk, because I can't waste precious Hero Talk time wasting that on a movie that I'm just going to have to watch again.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So, anyway, I think we've gotten to the point where we can now talk about what our favorite part of the movie is. So, I'm going to start with Jeff, because I'm really interested in what Jen's favorite part was. So we're gonna get the riffraff out of the way first. Jeff.
For me, probably the proper reveal in Hawaii, because that's the first time you get to really see him in full profile and hear him roar and all that. Mm-hmm. And yet, at the same time, I did have a lot of problems with Hawaii, but still.
And that's where the scene ended.
The intro was very impressive. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'd have to say that. And it's not a perfect scene by any stretch of the imagination, but it was memorable, and it was worth waiting the 55 minutes to see him finally, to see him introduced in that way. So
all right, yeah. So I'm gonna go next because we're gonna save Jen for last. My favorite part was actually, and this was, I feel bad using this one because this was in all the trailers for it, was that the Halo jump where they're going into San Francisco and the Halo jump, and there's smoke everywhere from all the fires and all the destruction, and you get these military guys who are dropping in, and as they're dropping in, you can see Godzilla through the fog as they're all just kind of at one point you're looking through the goggles of Ford as he's looking holy cow, now I'm just dropping next to this big old giant prehistoric monster right now. And it was, I love the visuals and how it worked, and you sort of you almost get the feel for, he's like, so we're going to jump into this, and we don't know where we're going to land, and somewhere down there are giant monsters. Good luck. And I loved it when in the previews. It's what got me excited for the movie, and when I even watched the movie, I still found myself I really love that scene. So that's my favorite part. Cool. All right, Jen.
I'm kind of stuck between two. I think my favorite is the reveal too. I hear what you guys are saying about how it was kind of cut short.
Yeah.
But the few seconds that I saw him, right when I saw him, to me that was enough because I was just so happy how he looked. It just felt so epic. And I really love the end when he wakes up and it says on the news King of the Monsters, Savior of our city. I just thought that felt so really epic.
Yeah.
Call me a dork, but I loved that scene.
I thought it was a little
cheesy.
It was more like, well, I wonder whose movie this was that you guys are in. We're gonna call him King of the Monsters. Oh, whatever. I mean, it felt to me when Superman starts using his powers and somebody decides we should call you Superman, and then it sticks. That's what it kind of felt like they were doing here. But
yeah,
I guess
it's inevitable that they're gonna do that in those movies.
Yeah, I suppose it had to come. If I could give an honorable mention, though, I would have to say it's probably Godzilla opening the female Muto's mouth and atomic breathing right into her.
Like the kiss of death, yeah.
The reason why I wouldn't actually call it my favorite is because I was kind of bracing myself for her to explode. You know what I mean? And so I'm like, oh man, and then she just kind of dies and falls down. Yeah. I'm like, oh, see, I was kind of hoping for explosion, so that's why it didn't actually make my favorite scene, but that's what it would have taken in order for it to actually be my favorite scene.
Yeah, fair enough.
All right, so I guess now we're at the time of Hero Talk. We got to give the sucker a score.
Yeah,
I don't know. So Jeff, what would you give Godzilla?
I will honestly give this a 4 radioactive Muto eggs out of 5. I quite enjoyed it, and I didn't have I don't have much Godzilla history, so I went into it without any baggage. Yeah. I really just I had the two things. I wanted to like the design. I wanted to like all aspects of the design of the main creature, and I didn't want a towering inferno ensemble cast where everyone and their uncle needed screen time, and it was overly complicated by too many human characters. I think they got that balance between the monsters. For an origin film, they got the balance between the monsters and the human element right, and it'll give them all the freedom to amp it up to the nth degree with double the monsters in in the second movie. So
yeah, well, I think what I like is kind of following up on you, is that even though I know some Godzilla history, I'm still able to come in and enjoy the movie as its own thing and be able to see it as its own complete piece. And I really appreciate that they didn't try to end this with some kind of like sequel, that they kind of left it on its own and left it to stand on its own. And so I was a little nervous they were going to, right after Godzilla goes into the sea, because there was a nuclear explosion out to sea somewhere. And apparently these guys just hang out close to the surface where that sort of thing can awaken them. And so I was a little nervous we were going to see the Mothra wing or something.
Yeah.
Now, I heard somebody say that, like, Mothra was, like, there was a canister, there was something in some office somewhere that said Mothra on it.
Yeah.
Did you guys notice that at all?
I didn't see anything.
Yeah, I didn't either. And I think it's kind of silly. Like, don't try to play that whole winky nudge thing. Like, do your own thing. We get it. It's Godzilla, Mothra, and Rodan, and King Ghidorah and Mechagodzilla they're out there.
Although, at least if they did it, they didn't make it so obvious, because all three of us didn't notice.
Yeah, well,
so to me, it's cool if they did it in such a subtle way that it's a flash. You have to look for it to see it. That's kind of cool. I'm okay with that.
A literal Easter egg, like that's just there for the keen observer and a little more. So,
there's some times where that gets a little... One example I will give is a movie that did the Easter egg that's so blatantly in your face that I just got angry about it, was in the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. When Indiana Jones is in that warehouse, which is clearly the warehouse from the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah.
And at first I thought it was a little bit of a neat Easter egg that he'd be there, and you're like, oh, get it? He's in the same place. The Ark's in there somewhere. That'd be cool. And then they actually knock over a crate, and the crate knocks open, and the Ark's standing there, and they linger on it for a while. Like, remember this movie, guys?
Yeah, that's not good.
So, yeah, I think this is... if they did it, and I don't remember if they did it, but that's the way to do it. Just show the shop, and then move on, so that I'm not sitting there looking like, oh, I get it, Mothra's in this movie. All right, so Jen, now we're on you. What would you score Godzilla?
I normally come up with some kind of cool rating. I love this movie. I'm not going to try to flash it up. I'm just going to give it 4 stars out of 5. I know that there were some issues with it, and, I agree with you guys on some things, but it really couldn't have been much better for me. I absolutely loved it. I had so much fun watching it. I loved the way he looked, the way he sounded, the way he moved. So I'm a big fan of this movie.
All right. So I guess I tried to think of like some funny things to come up with for my score, and so here's the best I got. I'm going to give Godzilla 4 speeding school buses on the Golden Gate Bridge out of 5.
That bus driver
great.
She was not waiting around to die.
The survival instinct was like, I don't care if you're military, I don't care if you got tanks, I am going now. You will get out of my way because I'm a school bus and I can kill you. So that was a scene that did make me chuckle a little bit, even though horrible sadness was going on around it. And also kind of sad because I like the Golden Gate Bridge, and I don't understand why all those Navy ships. Like, what did you guys think was going to happen? What in your history with Godzilla made you think that you were just going to be able to stop him? But I guess maybe you learned your lesson. Next time, let them fight, which I think is it was a great line from the movie, and it was probably going to, if I had to guess, is probably going to show up on some movie posters for a sequel. You're gonna show Mothra and Rodan and Godzilla, and it's just gonna say "Let them fight," and everyone's gonna get so excited and whatever.
Yeah.
And if I don't know, maybe that's all. I'd be willing to bet that if there's, I don't know if there's been any like reveals or anything at Comic-Cons, but if there is, or one coming up like in San Diego or something, like they're gonna do that. They're gonna just say "Let them fight." Maybe it's already happened. Maybe I'm gonna sound like a jerk here because I'm describing what I bet's gonna happen. It already has, and people are just gonna think I knew about it. But I don't care. I haven't
seen it either, but that is I would love that tagline if they put that there.
I don't think it's a bad tagline. I think it'd be very good. So, I mean, that's Godzilla. I think we basically are all sort of all on the same page, is that even though I was relatively lukewarm on the movie, I still enjoyed it. And I'm especially glad that after Labyrinth and Ultraviolet, I actually had a decent movie to watch.
Yeah, we were desperate.
Man, I tell you, man, Labyrinth was bad, and Ultraviolet was not good. And you get a string of movies like that, suddenly like, hey, you know what? Screw this podcast. I don't have to do this. This is my spare time. So it's actually kind of nice to watch a movie that one I really wanted to see and just didn't get a chance to see it in the theaters, and two that to have a reason to see it helped me out, and I was glad to see it, and because I bought it on Black Friday for like super cheap, so
Oh wow.
Yeah, it was one of my Black Friday purchases, so I think I got this thing for like $5 for the Blu-ray. So
oh sweet.
I mean that's less than a rental, that's less than a movie ticket, so I'm okay with the purchase. And I don't know if it's still $5 out there anywhere. Maybe you can find it cheap. I recommend the movie, honestly. I couldn't say that the last couple of podcasts, but this one, I can recommend the movie. I think it's probably something worth going out and finding. If you have any interest in Godzilla, you've probably already seen it.
Yeah.
I suppose I should say that. Like I'm on the far end of this, but yeah, absolutely, you should go see it and you should buy it. And there we go. Hey guys, thank you for coming on Hero Talk.
Thanks
for having us.
All right. On behalf of my panel, I just want to thank everyone for joining us. I also want to remind you, if you have a movie that you want to see us discuss or hear us discuss, I'm going to start that over. If you have a movie you want to hear us discuss, or if you want to join in on the panel, you can just email at herotalk@enthusiacs.com. For more podcasts, Let's Plays, articles, videos, reviews, all the good stuff, head to Enthusiacs.com. Check out the forums. Lots of good discussion going on there. And as always, I will see you all right back here for the next Hero Talk.